All right, ladies, so today we are going to be reading Teaching Nepalis to Read, Plant, and Vote by Leslie Reed. And our learning target for today is I can identify character traits and motivation. So again, traits are another word for qualities describing a character. And then motivation, remember, motivation is the reason that someone does something. Okay, so keep that in mind. We have two leading characters today. We have Dinesh and Ratna, who we're going to be introduced to in just a moment. But we're going to really be focusing on Dinesh. He's our main character for today. Okay, so let's take a peek here. I'm going to do our first read. 70 years ago, a boy named Vishnu Prasad Dungel was not allowed to go to school. As a result, thousands of Nepalis have learned to read and write. Huh! This is a remarkable story of Vishnu, his son Dinesh, and Dinesh's wife Ratna. When Vishnu was just a child, there was only one school in Nepal, and it was far away in Kathmandu. It was actually against the law to go to school in the villages of Nepal, because the government believed that it was easier to control people if they didn't know how to read and write. Back then, people arranged to have their children married very young. Vishnu was married when he was 15. He helped on the family farm, but he longed to go to school. Finally, he was so determined to get an education that he ran away to Kathmandu. Walking for 3 entire days, he completed 1 year of school, enough to get a government job. Vishnu had 25 children, though 10 died from diseases such as smallpox and measles and malaria, a tropical disease of a disease of tropical countries. As Vishnu's children grew, he was determined that they would go to school, so he brought a teacher from India to teach them. For doing so, Vishnu was sent to jail for 3 months for breaking the law. However, he didn't give up. He joined the Nepali Congress and then a legal political party fighting for democracy to fight for government. In 1951, when a new government came to power, education was finally allowed. Dinesh is Vishnu's third son. He not only went to elementary school, he graduated from college. Because he had studied English, he was able to get a job teaching Nepali to U.S. Peace Corps volunteers. Nepali is the language of Nepal. With that job came opportunity to travel around Nepal. Dinesh soon noticed how few poor Nepalis, especially women and girls, knew how to read. They now had the right to go to school, but they didn't have school or teachers. This realization inspired Dinesh to follow in his father's footsteps as a champion of education. As a result, thousands of lives were changed. Dinesh was fortunate to have married Ratna, a lively young woman who was also committed to helping the poor. They created an organization called the Non-Formal Education Services Center to educate poor Nepalis. Dinesh describes their first project. "We're working with a very poor tribal group that lived in the caves on the sides of steep hills. When we first visited, they ran into the forest because they were scared of strangers. They had nothing. I couldn't believe our brothers and sisters were living in this condition. While they set out teaching reading and writing, they quickly realized they needed to do something about the poverty they saw. After talking with the villagers, they decided to buy goats for the 10 poorest families. Goats could scale steep hillsides and eat the brush that grew there. When the goats gave birth, the kids were given to other poor families. Dinesh and Ratna also learned that orange trees would grow in the area, so they planted hundreds of trees. The villagers were required to save 1/4 of the money they earned from the goats and oranges. With their savings, they sent their children to schools that the center helped build. They were eventually able to buy land and build houses. Since then, the center has taught 20,000 adults and 5,000 children to read, as well as helped to lift them out of poverty. They have built 15 schools and 56 drinking water systems and planted thousands of trees. When democracy came to Nepal in 1990, the center also taught the meaning of democracy and the importance of voting and human rights. Ratna was eager to help the women and children in another village, so she started her own organization called Hands. To get to the village, she had to wade a river 7 times. It was a 3.5-hour walk to the nearest health clinic. When the river was flooded, the people couldn't get to the clinic at all. Ratna's organization built a health center. It also taught women and girls how to raise animals, to farm organically, and make tofu, to sew, and to make pressed flower cards, which Ratna sells in the United States. Of course, they also learned to read and write. In the poor areas of Nepal, Dinesh says, there is no TV or computer or electricity. Most children don't even have enough pencils or paper. When the rainy season starts, it seems like all of the rain is falling in the class because the roofs leak so much. The classrooms are tiny, dark, and cold. The children need to help their parents with housework, fetching firewood, and taking care of goats, or their younger brothers and sisters. Because of this, only about 1 out of 10 children complete grade 10. Dinesh and Rana have spent their lives trying to change this. Of this, Dinesh says, we are proud. So what we're going to do before we do our close read is let's preview our questions. So all of our questions are short response today, so please make sure that you are using RAP. What is the theme of the story? Number 2, what traits or qualities can be used to describe Dinesh and Ratna? Be sure to identify one trait for each along with the details that support your inference. So for here, ladies, make sure that we're reading this correctly. You need one character trait for Dinesh, one character trait for Ratna with the rationale. What human rights are violated in the passage? Again, I'm going to stream the video in just a moment so that you can watch that video again. I know that we love it. It's a fan favorite. Number 4, what point of view is the story told in? And how does this affect the way the story is being told? As a reader, would you prefer the story in a different point of view? Why? So this is more of an evaluative question. Again, you're kind of figuring out that author, the reason why maybe it was told in this point of view. How is it affecting the story? Would you have preferred maybe for it to be in a different point of view? I'm going to be explaining all that there. And then this is our big question for today. What was the motivation for Dinesh's actions? Why did he do what he did? Okay, so what I'm going to do first is I'm going to stream the video, and then I'm going to go over some notes that I took, and then we're going to look at some close reading marks and our short response question. Alrighty, so now it's time to close read. Chunk your text, circle and attempt to define unknown words, underline key vocabulary, and remember to focus on information that would help to support your answers because you've already previewed your questions. Okay, so keep in mind you're focusing on theme. You are focusing on different qualities of Dinesh and Ratna, right? We're thinking about those human rights. If you need to revisit that video from before, please feel free to. Point of view clues, think about those clue words to identify, is that first person or is that third person? And then again, that motivation, you're focusing on that reason for Dinesh's actions, okay? So you're evaluating there. Here's summarizing in the margin again. Your chunking, however, makes sense to you. You close read to make yourself understand the text better. Then you're identifying any elements that may be helpful in those margins or revisiting them before you go to your questions. So at this time, it's time to pause the video, do your close read, and then you can compare your marks against mine. Okay, so again, make sure that you're comparing your notes against mine. You should already have all of your close reading marks and your short response questions done. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to go through my marks, and I'm going to show you some additional notes and some kind of tasks that I put myself through to really dive into some of these questions that may need a little more of our focus. So if we're looking at our learning target, again, what I did here is I have a little um, definition here for motivation. Again, that is the reason that someone does something. Okay, so in my very first chunk, I had a really kind of the first half of this page here. I underlined because we learned about Vishnu, right, and his son. We kind of get a little introduction for that, and the kind of the history, the previous history of Nepal. So in regards to education. So my summary notes are previous history of education in Nepal, and then Vishnu fought for his children to get an education. So I had some words that I kind of defined along here, and I underlined that it was against the law to go to schools in the villages of Nepal. That really stuck out to me as something that was really a major factor of this story. And here, this is definitely that motivation for Vishnu, right? It was illegal, so he's like, I need to get my kids to school. What is it that I can do? And unfortunately, he endured quite a bit of hardship with the loss of so many of his children, which I'm sure even motivated him even more. Again, down here, he brought a teacher in, right? But he was sent to jail for that because, again, it was against the law at that time. He was fighting for democracy. And in 1951, when a whole new government came to power, education was finally allowed. So then we kind of get into Dinesh's story, right? So Dinesh here is Vishnu's third son. He went to elementary school and then graduated from college. So again, we're seeing some of those dreams that Vishnu had for his children. Some of those are coming true. And then what we learn is that Vishnu really follows in his father's footsteps, and he's this champion for education as well. And what I did here, right, we're thinking about this champion, we think of somebody who's won. And with education, we don't really win. We kind of fight for it, right? We support it. So here I defined it in this way: fortunate, lucky, realization, idea. And again, he wants to follow in his father's footsteps. Graduates college and marries Ratna. Okay, so here we're getting a little description about her. And then we get right into this organization that they created to educate these poor Nepalis. And again, the Nepalis are the people of Nepal. So that's why I have this big star here, because I was just thought of like, wow, so impressive. So impressive. I thought that this was a very powerful quote from him. I couldn't believe that our brothers and sisters were living in this condition. By calling him his brothers and sisters, he's identifying with these people. These are his people. He feels that obligation to help them. The next part here, they set out to teach reading and writing, and they quickly realized they needed to do something about the poverty that they saw. And again, poverty is very poor, lack of resources. So they came up with this amazing plan. So they bought goats for the 10 poorest families identified here, orange trees, and they planted hundreds of trees. So again, here you see I didn't get to underline happy and underline this entire paragraph. I just kind of pulled things that would really draw my eye. So then economic, right? Economic is anything involving kind of money in those plans. Economic plan using goats and orange trees to help the poor, which is super awesome. And then this was very cool. So this I kind of did the entire paragraph. Required to save a quarter of the money they earned from the goats and oranges. With their savings, they sent their children to schools that the center helped build. They were eventually able to buy land and build better houses. So this was their business plan to a better life that was given to them by Radha and Dinesh, which I just thought was super powerful. So not only are they giving them the tools, they're giving them this plan, this idea that they can take with them and pass on to other people to really help them get out of these negative situations. These are the results of the organization. 20,000 adults and 5,000 children read and have gotten out of poverty. And then he built 15 schools and 56 drinking water systems. Thousands of trees were planted. So again, and then this mention here of the importance of voting and human rights, super fifth grade topics. We love that. So then we get into kind of Ratna. She does kind of her own thing, which I love about her, very independent. So she was eager to help the women and children in another village. So she was like, in addition to this, I'm going to start my own organization called Hands. And so she built them a health center, and then at the center she was teaching them all of these different things to help them be self-sufficient. So I just kind of have hands down here. And then this is kind of talking about those conditions, and it really shows this modesty here of Dinesh. So if they get into the results, right, he was very successful kind of up in this paragraph here. And then when we get down, we're learning about, now that they have some schools in these poor areas, that they're still really lacking these resources. And they have other obligations to the family, such as these household chores and siblings and things like that, that education kind of takes this back seat, and he wants to change that. So he's talking like down here that we've spent their lives trying to change this and that they're proud of it, but there's still a lot of work left to be done. And that's what kind of his quotes in the above paragraph talk about. So more work still needs to be done in education. So then I want to bring you down here to possible themes. So I said the fight for education, helping others in need, and the power of learning. So this whole idea that these people were learning not only how to read and write, but how to become self-sufficient, how to live off the land, how to care for livestock. And then this fight for education that started at the beginning with Dinesh's father, Vishnu, and then helping others in need, which is kind of a universal theme that we've seen a lot this year. And then I have my point of view clues that I like to have if I know I'm having point of view questions, kind of those clue words that I'm looking for to identify, is this first person or is this third person? So I have that there. And then what I did, because I knew that we were going to be diving into a lot of traits and qualities and talking about these motivations, on the back of one of my sheets, and again, I apologize, Miss Eggins working in pen. My whiteout is at school, so I tried to be as neat as I can, but I do have a couple, scribbles on here, so I apologize for that. But I just did this on the back of one of my sheets to kind of keep everything together. And what I did was I identified some traits for each of them, and then I just kind of talked myself through it. So with Dinesh here, I'm going to go through each of these traits and then tell you why I thought that. And then I went through and I picked one that I thought was the strongest. So determined. He graduated from college. He taught Nepal, the Nepali, to the U.S. Peace Corps volunteers, and he created an organization with his wife to educate the poor Nepalis. I said he was loyal, and he was loyal to his father for becoming a champion of education, kind of following in those footsteps. And then to his people for giving them the tools and the resources to get out of poverty, right? He felt loyal to them. He felt this obligation to help them. He's passionate. He truly believes in the power of education, both in and out of the classroom, and he believes in giving back to communities through action, right? He's not just talking about what he's going to do. He is very active and has been very successful, which leads us right into the next one. He's successful. He went through graduation. He was a teacher for some time with the Peace Corps, the Non-Formal Education Services Organization. That was his big plan. His organization he had to help the poor. He had those business plans for the poor, and water systems and schools were built. Incredible. Then we're going to jump down to Ratna. Hardworking. She created her own organization with, in addition to the one with her husband, and she's working alongside Dinesh every day. So she knows that. So a lot of these can be applied to both of them, but she's right with him every day, so she deserves a lot of that credit too. Independent, which I think is my favorite one to describe Ratna. The Hands organization gave a major voice and focus to women, and she did this on her own. This was her own project, and I really love that about her. And then both of them, both collaborative, right? They work together with themselves and with others. They're supporting one another. They're very grateful for what they had. They said how proud they were. And they were kind of modest, though. They're not like trying to take all of this credit for everything. They're like, we still have work to be done, which I thought is very admirable for both of them. And then I want to talk about the rights violated in the passage before we get into it. So again, this is something that we would have done in class, right? We talked about put it all on the board and saying scribble all over the place, saying this right, and then kind of get rid of them as we go, right? Rationale to get rid of to make sure that the strongest one is left. So these were kind of the ones that stuck out to me. Rights violated in the passage. The right to education was the big one for me. Right to seek a safe place to live. Okay, because of those conditions. We're all born free and equal with dignity and should act in the spirit of brotherhood. I put a star next to this one because it doesn't start out. This one starts out being violated, but then in the end, Dinesh changes this. Okay, so this one is violated at the beginning, but then is changed. I put a little star next to that. And then right to freedom of thought. okay, by the government taking away, right, the right to education, obviously, but then also to this freedom to think, to be creative, to question, um, that was taken away as well. So now let's get into our questions. And again, I know Miss Egan says this a lot. We need to make sure that we're not just copying what's here. Okay? You're not doing yourself any good by doing that. You should have your own answers in front of you. And as I go through mine, be like, oh, that's similar for me. Or, you know what? Maybe I should have used a certain detail to support my theme. Again, a couple themes could have worked, right? We went over those at the beginning. A couple rights could have worked. Maybe certain things stuck out to you. Maybe you interpreted some actions differently and thought it was a different motivation. That's okay, right? We're all different. We all have these different opinions and these different brains. But what you're doing here is you're comparing against me. You are not just copying. So, number one, the theme of the story is the power of learning because Dinesh and Ratna taught people how to get themselves out of poverty and to read. The text states they created an organization called the Non-Formal Education Services Center to educate poor Nepalis. They also created an economic plan using goats and oranges to make Nepalis self-sufficient. So before I go on to number two, I really want to talk about a couple things that I did here that I want you to be aware of and then I want to challenge you to do, right? So when we're using our structure of rap, we're very familiar with that. And theme, technically that's our restatement and our answer, right? The theme of the story is the power of learning, right? And second has that there. But what I want you to do is I want you to kind of give that rationale in your inference. Okay, so then do you see here I said because, and then I kind of gave my rationale as to why I chose the power of learning. And then I supported with my two details. And as you can see, my first detail is a direct quote, but my second detail I paraphrased. Okay, so, and again, I think I pulled these right from my summary notes. So be using your marks that you've made to help guide you, right? Your questions now should be easy because you've already previewed them. Your close read is formatted so that it's guided right towards these questions. Okay, so this should be the easy part. But I challenge you to be a little creative. Make sure your response is great. Don't just get it done. Go back and evaluate it. Right now, you're looking at it with a set of second eyes. Oh, Miss Egan did it this way. Maybe I could do it this way. Or she chose that detail. Would that have worked better here? These are questions that you're asking yourself. You think about those discussions that we have in class when we're comparing our answers or when Miss Egan puts one up on the board. Right? Think about all those things you're evaluating right now. And you have an opportunity to, add, change, edit before you turn in. Dinesh was determined, so this is the one we're doing one for each character, okay? Dinesh was determined because he created an organization to educate poor Nepali. And then I did my quote. The center has taught 20,000 adults and 5,000 children to help lift them out of poverty. So here you see too, I'm kind of really elaborating in my inference. I'm saying he was determined because, and then I'm giving my detail to support. So here again, Ratner was independent for founding the additional organization called HAND. So I kind of, again, gave that rationale, that explanation part. This organization built a health center and provided education to women. There's my detail. Number three, this is our human rights violation question. So I said one right that was violated in the past was the right to education because the government limited education. The text states it was actually against the law to start schools in the villages of Nepal. We also learned that the poor areas of Nepal that did have schools were left with few resources and poor conditions. So again, the structure here, I'm really elaborating in my answer, right? I'm not just saying which is our inference. I'm giving that explanation why, and then I'm backing it up with my text evidence. And I'm going back and forth. I'm doing direct quotes, and I'm also paraphrasing. Okay, make sure you're introducing each of your details so it's very clear that they are two separate ones. So, point of view, I was looking for those clue words, right? Our narrator was not in the story. The only time we ever heard I or we was when it was introduced in dialogue, right? With those quotation marks. So we know that it is third person. The story is told in third person point of view, which allows for the reader to read the story from a non-biased perspective, okay? So we are given the events of the story with minimal emotions from the main character, okay? I would have preferred the story to be in first person from the perspective of Dinesh so that we could hear more of his voice in the story. So here we got a lot of the facts, right? That non-bias, that without any sort of opinions on it, without any previous connotations with it, okay? But for me, I don't know. I wish that it was told from Dinesh's point of view. I thought that maybe we could get a little more of that emotion. I really like that in a story, but you may like that it's told in third person because you got all the facts. You got to see kind of that background information as well. So it's up to you again. Number 4 is an evaluative question. You just got to back it up. All right. So number 5, I did some possible motivation down here below, and then I went up to my question. So let's take a look here at my notes. So possible motivation are his father to follow in his footsteps, the people of Nepal. He feels that obligation to help because they are his people. And I think that some of his motivation is the greater good. It's the right thing to do. And his own love of education he wants to pass on to others. So I think that these are his big 3 main reasons. Um, and so I chose one and then really, kind of developed it a little bit more. So I said the motivation for Dinesh's actions are the people of Nepal. He feels an obligation to help them out of poverty. The text states, I couldn't believe our brothers and sisters were living in this condition. Additionally, when they set out to teach reading and writing, they quickly realized that they needed to do something about the poverty they saw. Okay, so again, ladies, I know that our resources may be limited at home. I know that, Miss Egging's notes here are sloppy, but I just want to bring back up here to you, ladies, if you are struggling with figuring out a character trait, if you're struggling with figuring out a theme, story elements, think about what we do in class, right? This is something that we would put up on the board, kind of talk through. Use your resources. I scratched this out on the back of one of my papers, okay? So it doesn't have to be fancy, but however you can focus your mind is incredible. All right, ladies, I look forward to seeing you in Zoom. What is it going to be? It'll be today. All right. Look forward to it, ladies.